I think that the Queen of Swords is a very fascinating card, and I've learned a lot just looking at it over the past week or so. It is one of those cards that, again, like the other court cards, I was looking at from a certain perspective, and I've gained a deeper understanding of. So I want to share a few things with you here now. First of all, I'm going to look at some of the cards, and the first one I'm going to look at is from the Rider-Waite, RWS. And the Queen of Swords sits on a solid foundation. So this is someone very stable. And she also has a sword, and she has her arm outstretched. So she's welcoming, but also someone that really shouldn't be challenged. She's above the clouds. So that means she's at a high level. She's at a high level of communication, of logic, just a high level of light and intellect. And so that is a great person that you want to have on your side. There's also a bird symbolizing communication there up in the blue sky. And she has butterflies on her crown and on her throne, symbolizing transformation. And so she's able to transform situations. She's someone that can get things done and make things happen. So I think that that type of energy is definitely something that you want on your side. So another card that I want to look at is from the Cosmic Tarot, because it gives me more of a portrait of the expression of the Queen of Swords. And I think this is a very good balanced expression, because it's soft, but at the same time pensive and thoughtful and curious. So there is a very perceptive nature to that card, and it's balanced because, with the Queen of Swords, it's Libra, and in astrology, it is Libra and Venus. Those two energies are very good. They're very balanced, because with Libra, you have, it's very good at communication, very good at intellectual things. But then you have Venus, which is a much softer, more emotional side. And so when you have that makes the Queen of Swords, that type of energy, much more useful, in my opinion. Because I think on Patch Tarot, if you look at Patch Tarot, you'll see that the keywords here, if you can see that, are perceptive and detachment. So being perceptive is a good thing. But when you're perceptive without that balance, then you can be detached and aloof, and then your judgments can be rather harsh and kind of condescending. So there is, it's very important to have a balance there with the Queen of Swords. Now, one of the card that I find that represents what I'm going to be talking about the most, I think, is from Tarot Z. So this zombie sits in darkness with light shining on its face. And I absolutely think that the Queen of Swords has been there, been in the darkness, and learned from experience. And I think that, we do learn a lot from people who have been in our shoes. And not only that, but they are more understanding of our situations. And they're going to judge us in a way that I think is more fitting. So in my comparison to the Queen of Swords and Selenium, there are some really cool synchronistic things. First of all, the name. It was discovered by accident. There was a town in Sweden back in 1817 that had an impurity in this factory that was producing sulfuric acid. And this factory was trying to figure out what this impurity was. And for a long time, they thought it was tellurium. And tellurium is named after the earth. So when they found out that it wasn't tellurium, they decided to name it after the moon goddess, Selene. And I think that was a very fitting name, and it makes a lot of sense. I think at the time, they just saw it as being the opposite of Earth, so they would name it as the moon. Selenium, when it is in the presence of light, it's a much better conductor of electrical current. And it conducts electricity on a level that increases in certain circumstances. So when it sits in darkness, so for example, when you look at this Tarot Z card, when selenium sits in darkness, its ability to conduct electricity, to conduct energy, increases. So it gains from being in darkness. Just like the Queen of Swords, from her experience. And I think that that's fascinating. And that quality makes selenium something that is very useful. When we think about light, there's two ways to think about it. Light, like when we see, but also as knowledge. So what I'm saying here is sometimes when we sit in darkness, those are the times when we gain the most knowledge. Those are the times when we're better able to navigate. So when you're navigating in darkness sometimes, and then when you come into the light, you're a lot better. Just to give you another example of how it fits with the Queen of Swords and how this energy, I think, is embedded in this element. Selenium is used in photocopy machines, so in Xerox machines. So when you make a copy of something, there's this drum inside of the copier, and that drum is coated with selenium. And there is a light that gets shined across the paper when you put it into the photocopier. And that light, it reflects onto the drum that has the selenium on it. And the shadow from the ink on the paper is also reflected onto that drum. So what happens is, because selenium is more sensitive to light, it can push out the shadow. And then when the light hits the selenium, it pulls that light through. So the shadow is exposed.
When a document is placed in a copier, a bright light is bounced off the paper, through a lens, and onto a specially coated drum. The coating becomes electrostatically charged with a mirror image of the document.
So what selenium is doing is it is using light and it is exposing shadow. And that is a very, very valuable tool of the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is able to expose shadow by looking at what's light. She knows what light is, what truth is. She's very good at detecting it. And that really does push the shadow to the forefront. So the Queen of Swords is someone that is very good to work with in order to deal with a lot of shadow. Now, I know that a lot of people do their shadow work on their own, but there are certain people that we can work with in our lives who are really good at helping us dig deeper into the shadow, just like a Xerox machine. We use it to print information, but that's based on the shadow that's being pushed back. So what they do is they take ink and they pass it over that drum, and that ink has a charge to it, an opposite charge, and it sticks to the charge that's left on the shadow. And because it does that, that ink is then passed over a piece of paper, and it is in the shape of the shadow.
As the drum rotates, the fine black particles that make up the ink, called toner, are attracted to the charged areas on the drum, the same areas that would be the print on the paper.
So the shadow is exposed, basically. And I find that's absolutely fascinating. And when I looked at this card, I thought, wow, that just says it all. That light is shining on that zombie. And that zombie is sitting in darkness, gaining the ability to know light, to use light, to absorb it in a certain way. And then it reflects that shadow back out. And so that zombie, when you look at it, even though it looks bad, our shadow to ourselves a lot of time looks really bad when exposed to the world. But it's something that must be exposed nonetheless. And the Queen of Swords can do that. She has that ability. She sits on that throne, she's stable, and she's able to do that. And she does it in a way that many people may think is harsh and they may think is stern, but man, once she does it and it's on your side, you really appreciate it. And there are some crystals, and one in particular that I think really does embody that energy. So the first one that I have here is moldavite. Now, I've talked about moldavite in the past, but I think that it just has this energy because Moldavite came from darkness. It came from space. It came from deep space. It sat in darkness, and then it came to earth. And when it came here, it was exposed. It was exposed to light. And it has this energy of bringing out your shadow and exposing it and using that shadow to make you something else. So the next one is, of course, selenite. So selenite, of course, is named after the moon goddess as well. And the energy of it, I think, really does match with the Queen of Swords. And I think that it's a great stone to work with because it has that balance. It has that balance of emotion and that balance of knowledge, and also the ability to expose shadow and to bring things to light. So the moon is about shadow work, and this is a stone that is very much associated with the moon. The other crystal that I think is great to work with is moonstone. So there's one thing to know your shadow, to know your shadow side, but then there's also, what do you do? And the Queen of Swords, because she has the butterflies, she can transform. She can change that shadow. She can expose it and change it. Whereas with the High Priestess and with the Moon card, if you're working with those, they're very good at exposing. But I think in combination with the Queen of Swords, it's vital because you want to have some practical things that you can do. So then the last thing I wanted to mention here is that in association with the name of the moon goddess, Selene, I think that there is a connection between Selene, Hecate, and Artemis, forming a triple goddess combination, which is symbolized by the moon as well. That energy of that goddess is embedded within that name. And I think that Selenium, having that name and having that history, really does take on those characteristics. It takes on that energy, and it's used in a way that I think really does represent the energy of the Queen of Swords. So that's the information that I wanted to give you on Selenium and the Queen of Swords. And I'm looking forward to the next card. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.